24 hours before a big event, an Ironman, and especially if it's hot, I'll make sure that I preload with salt drink. And to do that, I basically use the correct salt tablet for me, which has been tested by doing a salt test. And then I'll typically have about maybe a litre during the day of fluid with the correct amount of salt for me. And then I also do that before I go to bed. I have another maybe 600 mils, and that helps to prepare my body to ensure that it's hydrated before the race. I mean, these don't have calories as well, so it's kind of good. So you go in hydrated, you don't have, like, maybe you can, it's best to kind of like make calories separate to your hydration so you can monitor them both separately. But so I do that, and then on race morning I also take another bottle as well, and just before, about 40 minutes before the race, I also take another 600 mils just to top up to make sure that everything's fine. So you should be going to the toilet, but not overnight while you're trying to sleep. If you're doing that, you're probably having too much. But basically it makes you a bit of a camel. So even if the race isn't necessarily too hot, it will just give you an insurance policy. Maybe if you miss a few hydration stations on the bike or the run, you've still got quite a bit of fluid because you've preloaded with salts. I don't have a huge salt loss rate. So for me, I probably can be a little bit, you know, I can miss a few aid stations and it's still okay, but some people, maybe that's not such a good idea. On race day though, I make sure that I always have extra salt in my hydration system on the bike frame. Then I'd take that during the back end of the bike to make sure that I've topped up for the run. Yeah, and then, I mean, I monitor my food for the race separately, so I'll fill my front hydration bottle. This is a good tip, but if you have a hydration integrated bottle, it's best to take a funnel. But I'll put food in there, and I make that as a separate decision to my actual hydration needs. And then, and then I'll run similarly a large bottle of, sort of more of a carbohydrate drink on the back of the bike. So I've got a good mix of everything, and I've sort of ensured that I've got the right amount of salt. But then also in the special needs, like I always put extra in case, like you can easily lose these, they can come unclipped. So I make sure that I've got a backup in case I lose this in my special needs, and also in the run special needs as well. But yeah, if you sort of on top of it, I mean, if you know exactly what you need, then it's a lot easier than trying to just guess with different foods and drinks and combinations of foods and drinks. Often the salt in a carbohydrate drink might not be exactly what you need, so it's best to manage them separately.
Look how they shine, looking at them, though you're not allowed to feed them.
We started a little bit easier this year and just took a bit more time, so and then things came together fairly quickly anyway, so it'll be interesting to see where the Ironman endurance is at.
Show your face, you're the party girl. Show your face, you're the party girl. Oh. Show your face, you're the party girl. Show your face, you're the party girl. Oh. Show your face, you're the party girl. Oh. Show your face, you're the party girl.
Australia with a time of 8 hours 53:37. Congratulations, Sarah Crowley.
But they won't get away. Can I get out of their heads? And they can get away.
Over the years I've practiced and I guess updated my strategy almost every race to try and tweak it and make it better, and I also have some slightly different things that I do depending on the heat, the temperature of the race, and the expected conditions. If you can practice it as many times as you possibly can with your, I guess, brick sessions and things to see how it works, and not just the nutrition for the day, but perhaps the nutrition the night before and of the morning that you expect to have for the race. So I guess with Cairns typically it's expected to be quite a hot race. So for this year, I obviously raced in Vietnam 3 weeks ago, and that was to get a little bit of heat adaptation. And leading into both Vietnam and this race, I saunaed. Now the purpose of sauning is to improve your efficiency at sweating, because sweating obviously helps you cool and moderate your temperature. And I find, and a lot of professionals find, that if you just do a few saunas each week, possibly 3 saunas of say 30 minutes after your last session of the day, jump straight in. It really helps with the heat adaptation process. Obviously not every race ends up the way you expect it to be. Like in the end, Cairns did not turn out to be a hot race like it typically would be, but despite that I still had like the positive benefits of conducting that process. So if you're heading to like a race that might be really hot, like Kona or something, like it's a really good thing to consider in the 2 weeks leading in. I wouldn't do it like 5 days out maybe from the race, but perhaps the 2 weeks prior to leaving for Kona, it'd be worth having a look into sauning. Obviously once you leave the sauna, you need to then rehydrate properly with whatever your salt drink is, or precision hydration is what I have. Another thing that people often ask me about is how close to a race to travel to the race. So for a race that is nearby, like Cairns for me is not too far, and I'd done sauning. I'd also raced in Vietnam a few weeks prior. I only left it sort of the classic sort of 3 days out. But for something more like Kona, where you have to travel a bit further and it's definitely a change in climate, I'll try and go 11 days out, which gives your body plenty of time. I think it takes like sort of 7 days to get used to the sort of humidity or the temperature of or the weather in a certain location. So it's worth maybe considering a little bit longer a lead in. There's pros and cons about each. You can stay at home a bit longer and get your lead up really quite dialed, but then I guess you're also traveling quite a little bit closer, and you might be a little bit more fatigued and tired from the travel. I guess I also sometimes get asked what do I specifically adjust for maybe a hotter race in terms of my actual training. Personally, I enjoy training in the sort of similar conditions, whether that be the actual course profile or the time of day that you expect to be competing. So I often try and do my runs in the hottest part of the day when I'm at home. Now that's not always as hot as it may be at certain races, but at least gives you a bit of a feel for when you're expecting and what the sun's going to feel like at that time of day. And that applies as well to the course profile. Like if you're going to have to run 300 metres of elevation, I will try and find a sort of a course that matches 300 metres of elevation around my home. So I guess I don't really specifically tailor any sessions really that significantly, other than perhaps wearing a wetsuit as well. So say for Cairns, we know it's a wetsuit swim, so we definitely did 2-3 sessions in the 2 weeks before in the wetsuit, just to make sure it still fits fine and that you're comfortable wearing it, because it does change your body position a little bit. So yeah, I guess we don't make major changes, but just little things that can tweak and help you to feel more comfortable on race day. I guess one thing that's difficult to be able to measure is your effort on the day, and sometimes you may race at a higher intensity, and this has happened to me in the Hawaiian Ironman. In fact, in 17 I almost bonked. I remember getting off the bike onto the run leg and having to spend the first half an hour just scoffing food because I knew I was struggling, and I'd planned that hydration and nutrition for I practiced it several times in a lot of races during the year, and I thought I was well prepared, but just the intensity of a World Championship event with everyone racing at a high level for the day, it just kind of maybe caught me off guard a little bit. So I think sometimes it's important, and since then I've made some adjustments by adding some extra nutrition in special needs and taking a few extra things on course that, just to be a little bit more prepared if it's maybe a higher level of energy expenditure than you planned. So that can actually happen in cold races as well, where you actually spend a lot of time trying to heat yourself and you don't actually realise, but you're actually spending, even though you might actually be going slower because it's cold, you're actually spending a lot of energy, extra energy, trying to heat. And people often underestimate hydration and nutrition in colder races. So I guess the whole, in summing up, the main thing is to sort of have a baseline. Like, very few people you talk to can whap out a sheet that says this is pretty much what I would typically have and the types of things that you eat and when you would eat them. And so I think that even just having that as a starting point is a really good start, and to then, I guess, make some smart choices as to what you add in and take out of that depending on what you expect from the race. And and I think once you get that baseline, it's pretty much, it makes it really mechanical and a lot easier, and you don't kind of stress about race day nutrition at all. It's just part of the process then. So tip, just get a baseline and make sure you practice it in your brick session.
Show your face, you're the party girl. Show your face.